Happy Jupiter Day, collective. Hope everyone's doing well. If you are already subscribed to this channel and have been following along, thank you. I appreciate y'all. And if you are just stumbling upon this little channel, perhaps because you're searching YouTube for astrological takes on eclipse season, if I had to guess, then welcome. I'm really glad you're here. And if you don't mind, I'd greatly appreciate if you went to the channel page and hit the subscribe button so that you can continue to follow along this year's very loud transits in a lot of cases, although I will say we're kind of in the, what I would say, the thick of it right now. I always like to point out to people who are maybe going through it right now that come June, the transits are going to be a lot smoother. I mean, I will say though that a lot of the things that people are going through right now, um, tend to have far-reaching effects. So when I say that the waters become a bit smoother sailing come end of May and June, it's sort of just like that's when you can sort of rest assured that the energy that you're pretty much experiencing now, and then whatever is unfolding as a result of whatever circumstances in your life are occurring right now, it's probably going to be keeping you busy, adjusting to that for a couple months and maybe longer, depending on who you are and what you're going through. But at least from an astrological standpoint, the main action is very much concentrated in the first 4 months of this year, particularly um, March and April. Although, I mean, everything in January and February has had its own sort of quality to it. I definitely understand that. But I just want to, I don't like to, I don't like to sugarcoat things that are just by their essence difficult, but I also don't like to create some sense of fear where it need not exist. I mean, I like to try when I can to just demystify things that I suspect you as a member of the collective might be feeling. And however things unfold in your life is of course unique to you and your life, but I like to, I guess, bring it back to the base premise of, and this is a Carl Jung quote, in more or less words, that whatever happens or is born at this moment of time has the quality of this moment of time. And that's pretty much a way of, for anyone out there who sort of is uh, skeptical or just like sort of trying to grasp, like, so what's the point? How does it, I don't understand. Like, what does the sky have to do with human behavior down on earth? And, I guess you would first have to subscribe to the belief or the idea that everything is interconnected, of course. Just, that's why it's like you look to the ground, you look to the sky, and everything on the ground and all the life that occurs down here, including us, is essentially just um, all part of the same energy of the celestial bodies of what's occurring in the sky. And so I think it's more proper, instead of saying, oh, the planets are directing what's happening down here. It's not so much that, it's just that it's sort of like a mirror of what is happening down here. It's a way to sort of, when you have the proximity of being right up close and in it, it's sometimes hard to get the big picture view. And sometimes looking up at the sky is just a way that some people, including myself, find it easier to gain a sense of footing in a world with a lot of moving parts, where I'm immersed in it and in close proximity. So it's more proper to look at it as everything going on in the sky, and the transits and the aspects have a certain quality. And in real time, once you study it long enough and see the patterns, um, and of course look back and see the quality of like this aspect and this transit coupled with like this one and that one, you can start, patterns unfold, they reveal themselves. And it's of course always in the context of that time that you're existing in, right? So um and that time that you're existing in has a certain quality. And so like I talked about in the Pluto and Aquarius video, there's a lot that can be said about, oh well, the last time Pluto was in Aquarius, you had like the French Revolution and the American Revolution. You had a lot of things that might make you kind of fearful to be experiencing, this transit now. But again, the transit itself is just one piece of like the qualitative whole of the time, which includes other aspects and transits that aren't going to be the same as now. So in astrology, it's important to try to isolate the energies of just this planet in this sign and the archetypes involved, in light of those things, and then try to gauge based on like a number of different things that color the overall quality of how it might play out now. And even then, that's an imperfect art or science or a mix of both. Really, it's uh, it's really unique in that way. And it's kind of why it captures the intrigue of a lot of people, because even the most seasoned astrologer and somebody that has studied the planets and understands history well, and sort of a collection of different skill sets, even then your predictive abilities are going to be limited by, of course, you just being a mere mortal alive alongside everyone else, with the limited scope that you in your lifespan have. So um, the eclipse season that we're in now is is a special one in that yes, there is an eclipse season every year, but there's a really interesting sort of buildup of, especially if you're going back and looking at the last year and a half of your own life, and sort of the direction that things have gone, sort of collectively, and how it would be tempting to sort of look and be like, oh well, nothing makes sense, and everything's changing, and nothing's same, and everything's chaotic, and it's sort of limited by your own proximity of these things. But when you take the step back and you look at it from the lens of astrology and the archetypes and the planetary energies, you start to see this picture being painted about what it means to have a society that's on the trajectory that ours is, and particularly as it pertains to technology and AI, of course, but just technological advancement of society. But when technology is the underlying driver, um, when you look at the Industrial Revolution, for example, and you had that sort of propelled motion forward, it was still limited by like the physical reality of what it takes people to build skyscrapers and build things, the limitations of the 3D world. And even that was a very fast and jolting sort of feeling to the people sort of on the ground up close living through it. It was its own sort of traumatic thing to witness, the skylines and the landscape being transformed by people that were used to a much slower pace of things. So then when you consider the effects of industrialization, both, in America here, but, in the world, um, that had a much longer time horizon. And so when you look at those similar, when you look at the advancement now and like put the context of AI into it, and that being sort of an exponential uh, rate of growth comparatively, and the effects of it also being far reaching, just like the Industrial Revolution, changing priorities and the way people do things and where people live, and what they view as possible within the timeline of an ordinary human life. I mean, all those things are changed forever when you have rapid expansion of technology. So in our case, in the digital world, it's can be very disorienting. So there's a lot of, I guess, advantages that come with that. Of course, just anyone who's online and benefits from, still being the master of the tool of their technology versus the other way around. Um, you see the advantages, of course, and like sort of delegating certain more mundane parts of your life to technology. And of course, it's always a double-edged sword, as lots of like movies and like pop culture sort of things have laid out for us. But I will say that the responsibility, the part that comes along with it, in terms of the level of discernment that's required of people, and sort of a degree of authority, a degree of inner authority when engaging with technology now and moving forward, that is required of people that they might not necessarily be accustomed to, I guess, taking accountability in that way. Like if you're used to sort of the old way of doing things, or the old world, you might say the opposite of Pluto and Aquarius, which on the other side, as I've discussed, is Pluto in Leo. And Leo is about one central figure, like Leo, the king, associated with the monarchy. And you look and you go, oh, what does the king tell us to do? What does the central leader tell us to do? And then in exchange for the protection of the king, we do what the king says, or what the one central leader says. And then we just kind of go on autopilot from there. And so I talked about in the Pluto and Aquarius video, where when it's, the whole power back to the people, Pluto and Aquarius, um, that means that when the power goes to the people, the responsibilities and all the things that come with power go back to the people. So it's a level of responsibility that takes some adjusting. Like you kind of have to retrain yourself in terms of where your sense of authority comes from, and stop looking outside of yourself for direction or answers on what to do, or what's happening, or what's true and what's false. And that can be very difficult for people that, especially when you look at the side of technology, that's specifically social networking, and how where we get our news and where we get like real-time information about what's going on, both important and trivial, plus our entertainment, plus communication. We've kind of merged all of those things in a lot of cases to one platform or the other, depending on what your social media preference is. And there have been a lot of widespread repercussions as a result. And what it's ended up being for a lot of people is they open their one social media app, and whatever is on this timeline is sort of my understanding of the world right now. Like my reality is based on whatever my algorithm on this platform is feeding me. So therefore, yeah, you're scrolling and you're clicking on things, and so you might have this illusion of being in control and having authority over what your opinions are when you click off of the social media app. But really, you are being fed a very specific I guess, view of things based on an algorithm specifically tailored to, what you like to see. That's what an algorithm does. And so, um, the danger, of course, is in not having that self awareness. Is the whole point. Like, social media isn't going to go anywhere, and everything I've just described is, you know, it is what it is. But I think the real thing that we're being asked to do is to really stop looking externally for sort of not just validation, but for our cues on what it is we should be doing with ourselves and with our attention, and the opinions we should have, and what we should be mad about, or what we should be celebrating, or what it's kind of hard though when you think that you're already doing that, but then once you take a little social media cleanse, you might find that you really start to notice like how much of that feed is influencing where your mind goes when you're not even holding your phone. And so um, I say all this because it's no mystery that even social media, aside from it governing our view of the world and like who's in charge says what, and if I can even trust what this rendition being presented to me, if this is legit or if this is like a deep fake or some AI generated thing. Aside from that level of discernment needed, on that same platform, in that same algorithm, we're being fed, you know, posts about our friends, and then like posts about people that are sort of acquaintances and not quite friends, like the mixing together of all of the relationships in our lives. Like, oh, there's your boss, and there's your really close friend, and there's your neighbor over here, and they're all on the same timeline, and you're interacting with these posts just sort of one after the other. And at a certain point, it also has a way of blurring your own understanding um, of what is a close relationship to you. Like, in other words, if all of these types of relationships that you ordinarily would have to give individual attention to and tend to, um, on an individual level, say through text or phone call or in person, if they're all sort of like jumbled together on the same timeline as everything else, um, what understanding really do you have of the nature of your own relationships, and therefore of your own identity um, in relation to those things? And so I highlight all of these things about identity and relationship, and how the world, the context that we live in now, is really an important underlying factor in the energies of these eclipses, because the lunar eclipse that we just had, so I discussed in my last video, this occurred on Monday, the Libra lunar eclipse, and Libra is all about relationships. Libra is the glyph is the scales of justice, and it's all about it's Venus ruled, so it's all about like finding the harmony and balance, and diplomacy and compromise, all of those things. Like the primary focus of Libra, being ruled by Venus, is relationships, and so of all kinds. So when you go to the other side, the axis, just like Leo is the other side of Aquarius, that's like the same energy really, but manifested in two different ways. That's the same with Libra and Aries. So then you go to the other side of the wheel and you look at what's on the other side of Libra, and that's Aries. So Aries is quite it's the same energy, but it's the different manifestation. Aries is about like the individual. It's about my own unique assertion of my unique self, that cardinal fire energy. It's like the act without think. I express myself. I don't think about it. I don't think about how it necessarily affects someone else. It's about me. It's about me, and like the energy that propels the spring bulbs to pop up, like no matter what, just without considering what's around it. That's Aries energy. That's the spring equinox energy. So um the eclipses existing on that axis is highlighting though that actual principle, like the relationship between self and other, and particularly how to properly become, like, what is the balance between going within, like sort of ignoring what the outside world is telling you you're supposed to believe or think or feel, um, and and sort of being the master of yourself in that way, while still understanding that you are not an island, that you're still part of the whole. You're still part of the collective. You're still part of this friend group, and you're still part of this workplace group, and you're still part of this neighborhood, this community. Um, all of those things require those Libran principles of balance and harmony, and in some cases compromise. But in order for you to meaningfully participate in these groups, you have to have a firm grasp of your own identity. You show up and you insist upon um, the parts of yourself that are non-negotiable, and then the parts that are, you really have to be fair and see yourself as part of the group. And sometimes you gotta give so someone else can give in their own way too, to create something that's best for the whole. And that is that's a skill that I think we all work on for most of our lives. And it's not just a thing you've perfected and then you can just stop thinking about and move on. But there's a reason that we're all being asked to do that now. And so when I talk about what this lunar eclipse in Libra probably brought up for you, and in the video I put the Five of Cups card there, and you can go back to that video if you want to go more into the themes of that. But really, what this lunar eclipse probably brought up within you somewhere is contemplating your relationships with not just people, but like roles that you've played in your life, behaviors that you've held on to, places that you live or work, and that you show up in, and sort of considering how much of your identity is tied to each of those things. What of any of those things could stand to be cut away, as harsh as it sounds? And in what cases it can just simply be renegotiated. Maybe compromise is needed on your part more in some of those relationships. Maybe compromise is needed from someone else more in some of those relationships. And I think that that's what the energy that especially carried over in the days following, including now, it can feel really uncomfortable actually, because you go to that shadow side of Libra, of course, and it's people pleasing. At the end of the day, we want to be liked, and that's a very human thing, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Um, and yet we still want what we want. We want to like work towards our desires and like find a way to where I can get what I want without like overstepping a boundary or something. And how can I communicate that with the people in my life to make it a harmonious exchange for everyone? So that can be where a lot of discomfort might be coming from now, is contemplating. Maybe you've identified some of these areas, and sometimes it's like with a behavior of yourself, and it can bring up a lot of sort of emotions, um, frustration, or maybe sorrow, or reminding you of like a thing that you should have addressed a long time ago, and now sort of bubbling to the surface. And so here you are, maybe mad at yourself that like you put it off, and that's all normal. But I would say that this space between, I'm calling it, the Libra lunar eclipse and then the upcoming solar eclipse in Aries on April 8th, that's what this space between is about. And that's the whole point of this video. I'm not going to get into the solar eclipse itself. I'm going to do that a bit closer to the actual eclipse. I just wanted to focus on this space between, because this is sort of where like the discomfort is really um, being felt. And I just wanted to let you know that if that's what you're feeling, that is very normal. And I think that's what you are being asked to sit in. And um, that's why I have, and probably noticed in the foreground, we've got the Hanged Man card, It's Major Arcana number 12. And the Hanged Man is associated with the sign of Pisces, actually. But what I like about this card, just like, most of the tarot and especially the Major Arcana, it's an image that's meant to be universally understood. So you look at this picture and it's clear that this figure, there's no movement going on, right? This figure is suspended by one foot, but you think of the Hanged Man, and if you don't see the picture, you think, oh Lord, it sounds very unpleasant, and you don't know what to expect. But when you see this image, you're like, oh well, it looks a bit leisurely, like he's only tied by one foot, and then the other leg is sort of resting comfortably, like in this relaxed position. He's suspended from the tree of life, and his hands are just kind of loosely behind his back. It's not even clear if they're tied. It just looks like he's just hanging out there. Um, the look on his face is one of calm, and you also see like the illumination around his head, the yellow illumination, suggesting that this sort of being in a period of suspension, of being upside down, and seeing things from a different perspective, is creating and leading to a place of enlightenment. And um, that's really that's why I chose this card for this period right now, because you might feel a sense of, especially if you have a lot of fire in your chart, a sense of frustration, because you might feel all of this like energy and this like, you got these grand plans for yourself and you got that wand energy, you want to act, you got the passion, you've got ideas, and you want to do and like um go and like experience. And for some of you, that's coming easier than others right now, but even so, you might find that you're like kind of fighting like against the wind, or like sort of swimming like against the current, despite your best efforts, and you're being really motivated. And that is something that's also sort of characteristic of this energy, the fact that doesn't matter how motivated or energetic you are, you're still subject to these collective energies that are almost like forcing a slowing down, forcing you to make sure that the direction that you are insisting upon or pushing has been properly contemplated. And are you using the proper level of discernment given this like new thing you're embarking on? Have you considered all of the players involved that will be affected by you pursuing your desires? Have you considered sort of the longer term repercussions, but specifically as applied to your relationships? And so this space between is very much a hanged man sort of place to be. And like I was explaining to someone earlier who told me that I presented a series of cards, and I asked a group, I said intuitively, everyone pick one of these cards. And someone in the group chose the Hanged Man. And just based on what I knew was going on in their life at the time, I thought that to be very proper. And then they came back. What was really interesting is they came back and said, oh, well, I don't know, after sitting with it, I kind of like that last card. And out of all the cards I'd presented to choose from, the Hanged Man being one of them, the last card that this person was talking about was the Three of Wands. And I don't think I've done a video on the Three of Wands, but I have talked about what wands are associated with fire. So Aries, Leo, Sagittarius energy, but it's like passion, it's action. It's very much associated with like do. Um, and so it was also funny, given what I know about this person's circumstances at the moment, that they were like, yeah, actually, let me change my vote from Hanged Man to Three of Wands. And I explained to this person that I was amused just knowing what they're going through lately, and how it was sort of it it was neat to see that they went from a place of suspension and like sort of unable to move forward, a place of just like forced contemplation and then like enlightenment gained as a result, to sort of taking action, a three, as I may or may not have explained before. Threes are associated with creating. Threes are um, the Empress is a three. The Empress creates everywhere she goes. She's abundant. She creates, like, she creates life, whether that's just literally, like as a mother, or just like, you know, building a beautiful garden, or like creating a piece of art. Like, it's just a creation type number. Number three, it's the number of creativity, creation, childlike joy, associated with being the creator of something. And so the Three of Wands is very much like an energy of creating. Like, I'm in the process of creating. I've taken action. I was in this place of suspension. I've taken action. And now I'm, as the card shows, someone just like waiting for their ships to come in. They've got the Three Wands and they're just looking out with their back facing, towards you, as the viewer of the card, and they're just waiting for the ships to come in. And so, um, I thought it was a really interesting, because this person, you know, doesn't know like all the meanings of the tarot cards, and they just did what I asked them to do, which was intuitively just looking at the image without overthinking it, to pick a card. And so I just thought it was really interesting, and it was very much capturing what I would hope would be the momentum, after this space between period, after you've sort of like experienced the discomfort of the Libra lunar eclipse, and sort of having to take that long, hard look at both yourself and your relationships, and go, okay, I think we need to go back to the drawing board here, and maybe like cut some things out, and you know, refine and sort of tweak here and there, and maybe add back in. And that is just uncomfortable for a lot of people. Um, so in this period of time leading up to April 8th, I have to say that it's only going to be, your experience of it, I would suggest, would be made better by kind of surrendering to that energy. And that's not to say to just like sit back and like quit whatever momentum you've got going for you, and like whatever projects you've got going on. That's not that at all. It's more so of, if you do happen to have that momentum, and you are like trying to get this ball rolling and that ball rolling, and you're met with some resistance and things that just seem sort of beyond your control, that is, that's normal right now. Because if you think about it, all these balls that you have rolling require, other moving parts, which are usually other people. And so, um, you have to understand that, everyone being connected and everyone being subject to these energies, the quality of this time that we're living in, um, you can't achieve your desires alone, no matter how much you think you can, because what you need and want is out there in the world, and there are other people who are involved in those processes. So, um, I say this just so that, when I say surrender, that's what I mean. Like, keep going with what you're doing, but surrender to the reality of the quality of this time is I think the best takeaway here. And so, I wrote some notes too, just as a, I wanted to talk for a second, because of its relationship to the Hanged Man and to the sign of Pisces, where we still have a lot of planets right now hanging out, including Mars. So, one thing I want to point out is, in astrology, what we do when we have some sort of celestial event, so like the solar eclipse in Aries, for example, um, if we want to understand the archetypes that are going to also be coloring the energy of what a solar eclipse in Aries is, so Aries is ruled by Mars, we need to look to see where Mars is right now, because Aries is always going to be ruled by Mars, but any celestial event occurring in Aries, um, we'll have a more well-rounded understanding of the nature of it by looking to see what Mars is doing at that moment. And so, right now, and at the moment of the eclipse, Mars is in Pisces, and Pisces being, the last sign of the zodiac, the ocean of emotion. It's also co-present with Saturn, which is still making its way through Pisces. Venus is still in Pisces, and Neptune is still in Pisces. So the solar eclipse on April 8th is ruled by Mars in Pisces. And so there is that emotion element of Pisces, and Pisces being a place of sort of that liminality. And that's kind of frustrating because you look at Aries energy and it's Martian energy, like especially with the spring, and the cardinal fire likes to be decisive. It just like wants to do. And Pisces energy is not that. So that's also kind of contributing to the discomfort, because um, we did the same thing with Libra, the Libra lunar eclipse. We were like, okay, well, Libra is ruled by Venus, so where's Venus? What energies are sort of underlying this Libra lunar eclipse? And Venus was in Pisces. So we have Pisces being this sort of looming presence in this Libra Aries axis of eclipse energy. And that is why these deep emotions are coming to the surface, because aside from any sort of evaluation or inventory we do about ourselves and like others and our relationship to others, of course that generally involves emotions, but you might find that it's like more so than you might expect. Lately you think, yeah, my relationship with other people involves my emotions towards those people, but um you might find it to be a little overwhelming in certain ways, that you like is catching you by surprise. And that's because Pisces is the underlying archetypal energy of this Aries Libra axis of eclipses. And um, so I wanted to point that out because Pisces is also associated with the 12th house. And I don't talk about houses all the time. I mention them in passing, but for anyone that knows a little bit about astrology, um, you probably know that there are 12 houses, and the houses are laid out in a wheel. You could find a chart of them online. You could Google the 12 houses of astrology and probably find a pretty good take on it. And it basically is just the areas of life where the activity occurs. So if you've ever had your birth chart done, um, of course, it's on the wheel. And then there are these numbers, usually on the inside of the wheel, 1 through 12. And wherever you have planets, everyone has, an archetype governing each house, but especially where you have planets, that is going to be a house, an area of life, you might say, of particular prominence in your life. That's just something any astrologer can see right off the bat. I can see what house your sun is in, and that's a pretty good starting point of intelligence gathering, you might say. And same with your moon, and same with Mars and Venus. What house these main, especially your personal planets, are in is a really great starting point to understand the major themes of your life, and where a lot of growth and the eventfulness, for better or worse, is going to occur. And so and when I say eventfulness, I mean like great fortune, and sometimes I mean great struggle, and from the great struggle is born great fortune. It's just, that's the way it all works. There's no great suffering without some huge potential for growth. And I guess if you define personal wealth more expansively, um, the wisdom that can be gained, and therefore the wealth that you as a person can build in terms of like your own efforts in the world through struggle and suffering, that goes beyond money. That's what I mean. There's no like Saturn. Saturn is often looked at as sort of like the sort of the karmic planet, and the one that the great punisher, and then Father Saturn, and he's unforgiving. And that's one way of looking at it. But the way I like to look at Saturn is Saturn delays but never denies. So people with a lot of Saturnian influence in their charts often have lives characterized by like lots of struggle, especially earlier in their lives. And when I say earlier, I can mean like the first half of your life. You could find yourself like at middle age and wondering like when Saturn is going to like get off your case. And that's actually when you might find the whole reaping what you sow starts to feel the most palpable. And that's when you really start to see and understand, if you're looking and willing to understand, where the struggles of your life, your early life, how they're really paying off now. And sometimes it really takes you getting to the brink and just wondering like, what do I got to do to like um, ease this suffering? And I definitely can relate to that, to suffering in ways to where you don't that they were circumstances beyond your control, and the suffering that comes with trying to understand what possible value can come of that suffering. And that's not unique to me, but I suspect that if you find yourself on this channel, you can probably relate to that in your own way. So um, if you are if you are very have a lot of Saturn influence in your chart, and you are used to the struggle, so to speak, um, and how isolating it can feel to be suffering, especially when you're surrounded by people primarily earlier in life. I mean, it could be later in life, but just for an example of like, things seem simpler when you're younger. So when you are amongst your peers and your life seems like extremely complicated and complex, and not smooth sailing in the way that you think like an 8-year-old's life should be, for example, it kind of brings something out in you uh, earlier on in your life that a lot of people don't really come around to until later. And you don't see it as an advantage at that age, of course. But as you get older, you really start to see how it was an advantage the whole time. Granted, you wouldn't have chosen it, but it was. So I talk about how isolating suffering can be, because um, the 12th house, it's the last house before you get to the first house of which is your rising sign, and that being sort of self identity, like your first how it feels to experience the world as you. um, Before you get to the first house, you have the 12th house, and the 12th house is like one of the very, it can be hard to grasp because of its very nature. Just like any liminal thing is by definition hard to grasp. And when I try to explain the concept of liminality to people, I think the best the examples I like to give are like a hospital waiting room, like to where time and space is suspended, and you're just, it's isolating, especially if you're just there waiting on like waiting to hear the word on someone that you love, or the waiting room at the vet, waiting to hear what the deal is with your beloved pet, or um, any sort of place where you feel that it could be any time, anywhere in the world. That room itself is extremely liminal. It exists. Um, your experience in it feels the same no matter where you are and what timeline you're on. It's a hospital waiting room feels the same no matter what stage of life you're at. It's very liminal. It's like it never closes down. It's like this continuum of um, waiting, and then like getting news, and then like either being relieved and leaving, or being given news that you don't want to hear. It's everyone has this understanding of like that feeling of a hospital waiting room. Um, a liminal space could also be like confined to your bed sick for like several months because you're recovering from a surgery. And especially if it's like summertime and everyone's out and about and going, and like right outside of your window there's like life occurring, and like birds and like squirrels and the trees and all of those things, all the activity and the cycles of nature going on, but you are confined in your room, and like just with like the rays of sunlight coming through the blinds, and you don't know what time it is, you don't know what day it is, you barely know what week of the summer it is. um, but you've just been in bed for all this time recovering. That's a very liminal space. You kind of lose your bearing of time and space and how much time has passed, during this period of isolation. um, it's sort of like a train station, like where the trains keep going on cycle, and it's like you're just the only one down there waiting, and the lights are always on and the trains are always going. And at a certain point, if you don't have like a clock or watch or anything, you lose track of how long you've even been down there. These are the liminal spaces, but either way, they feel isolating. They feel like you've been suspended in time and space. And I also like to describe the week after Christmas, but before New Year. So like December 26th, January 1st, that feels very liminal. And I think every year everyone observes like how chaotic and like untethered it feels, no matter how your life is going. In the days after Christmas, but before New Year's, it's like nothing can really get done. There's no forward movement. And all you want is for everyone to stop asking you things. You don't want work to ask you things. You wish everything could just stop, because um, it's like the old year is dying and the new year struggles to be born type feeling. That's very much the 12th house. A lot of it, there's one astrologer, I forget who it was, that described, they likened the 12th house to the birth canal. I thought that was a really interesting description, because the 12th house being the birth canal also makes you understand that it's a place of ending and beginning, but simultaneously, of course. So, and that is marked with discomfort, primarily for the woman, but also for the child. Like being born is a traumatic experience, actually, because you are saying goodbye to the comfort and warmth of the womb, to where your only job was to just literally feed off of like the nutrients from the mother. You didn't have to do anything. You were in like the warm amniotic fluid of the uterus, and then um, once the contractions start, which is like the woman's experience of the old world dying and the new one struggling to be born, that's you literally being forced out of like that incubation period and going through the birth canal. Like it's an ending of something so that your actual first breath can occur. And um, I think it's a really apt description of the 12th house, because just like in your bed, isolated from everyone, recovering from a surgery, the reality is you are recovering from a surgery. And so every day that you spend in that bed, you're one day closer to having recovered from something that was often, a threat to your continuance. So it's like you feel an ending of, whatever ailment or thing that needed curing, but you still feel like suspended. You feel like there's no forward movement. Um, but yet it is every day that you're continuing in that space of like in suspended animation. That is progress. It just sometimes you don't see it. And going back to the whole lessons of therapeutic horticulture, and like just like any gardener sees how the metaphors write themselves all the time, is especially in that period right before spring, and even now in some cases, um that beneath the surface it's just teeming with activity, whether it's seeds that you've planted or your bulbs or like whatever perennials that are sort of slower to break the earth from below. That they're down there. It's like if anyone out there grows hostas. I started doing an inventory of my hostas a week or so ago, because uh, I knew that they were probably going to make a really good showing this year, because they've been there. Specifically, I have these hostas called Empress Wu hostas, and if you've never seen them, they're very impressive. They've just got these huge leaves, and like they almost look like prehistoric because they're so large. And um, being that I planted them like 3 years ago, I'm expecting them to make like a really impressive showing this year. And so I've been monitoring, their progress, breaking ground. And I just was able to catch some of them like popping up from the ground. Like I said, like a week or so ago. It made me really excited because I was also able to see like, oh, I can separate these. I can get, more. I've never dug up the things and like cut and, separated them out, but I'm going to do it this year. And, you can see them coming up from the surface, sort of the points to where it's multiplied. So I've got like 3 in one now. I just need to go out there and like divide it up. But it had just broken ground, whereas like some of the ferns and some of the other perennials had broken ground way before, like to where you could actually start seeing them form and taking their recognizable form quite a bit earlier. But it would have been a mistake to just go and say 2 or 3 weeks ago and think that there was nothing happening. But right beneath the surface, there was a lot happening, of course. It's just sometimes things like that don't become visible. And then all of a sudden, there it is. So I have to say, too, that, this theme of almost being in this suspended state and endings and beginnings seeming to being an occurrence, like simultaneously being a theme shared by a lot of people right now, is I've talked about my friend and neighbor several times on this channel, and I had her over for dinner last night. And of course, like anytime we get together, I just mention the transits, and then I go, "How are things with your clients? Like, what are the general themes popping out?" And so I started with the whole, you know, yeah, this Libra lunar eclipse, these are the themes. And a lot of it has involved sort of like the endings and beginnings, and almost the greatest joys occurring alongside and overlapping with the greatest sorrows, and how it's can be very emotionally taxing in that particular way. And she was just like, it's funny, you just took the words right out of my mouth. Like, a lot of people, she was saying, are experiencing things like losing a parent and like a baby being born, like all within this, like all within a week, like literally experiencing death and life, the juxtaposition of great joy and great sorrow, great loss, but then um, something new being created, and those two things not really related to one another, but still being a part of the same emotional experience. And it's been that way, she says, like, because she's got a pretty large client pool, and so these themes present themselves pretty readily to her. uh, she's also saying how this week especially, and I can't help but imagine it's sort of the emotional overwhelm a lot of people are experiencing. She had like 3 clients cancel. She was saying, like, for today, and she, all these spots like opening up unexpectedly. And as a therapist, I'm sure you can expect like cancellations here and there, but it was sort of like these clusters of cancellations that seemed to be uh, hard to ignore. And so I really saw that as probably, ironically, when you think people probably need therapy the most, it's almost like the emotional overwhelm um, made them want to cancel. And I could really relate to that because it's like with this channel, I myself, for the last 2 weeks, like a week ago, I said, "Oh, I need to make a video. I want to talk about the space between the Libra lunar eclipse." But realistically, I was like, well, I've already talked about the Libra lunar eclipse. Let's let that happen, um, and then come on and talk about the space between. And it took me until today, despite wanting to do it, check in on Monday and then Tuesday. It took me today to really be like, okay, now I have something to say. But just like everyone else, I too am experiencing the effects of the eclipses. And like, I could understand why someone would want to cancel on their scheduled hour with talking it out with somebody, not as a means of avoidance, but because sometimes it's just like hard to really parse out where do I begin? How could I even begin to describe um, the collection of emotions I'm feeling, because I myself am still just trying to sort through them. And so that's really where the practice of therapeutic horticulture has really helped me. It's like I was more so engaging in the subject matter as like a coping modality myself for the last 2 weeks, especially. I've been like leaning hard into engaging with my plants, and like sometimes just like walking around and taking pictures of them and telling myself like, oh, I'm going to make a short out of this, or, make this into like some video, and then ending up not doing it and not fighting myself to do something that didn't seem to be happening organically, if that makes sense. It was sort of like, me engaging in the practice, and then in the back of my mind thinking, oh, I could make like a video out of this. And then sort of surrendering to the fact that, like, for whatever reason, I just didn't have anything to say. I didn't have a cohesive thing to present. And so I didn't, which I think is doing a favor to the internet more than anything. If you don't have something to say, not saying it, imagine that. So that's where I've been the last 2 weeks, is like have an abundance of photos and all kinds of things that in my mind I was like, oh, I want to share these. But I don't know, I just felt compelled to like kind of go within, just keep grounded by engaging in the activities. But if I didn't have anything meaningful to express outwardly, to just be okay with that. And I think that's really the takeaway here is you might feel frustrated by no forward movement, and you might feel frustrated by the fact that you're like, man, I actually have the desire and enthusiasm to do this, and why am I meeting such resistance? Well, that's why I'm here making this video, to let you know that there are things at play that go beyond what your own desire and willpower and discipline and strength can do for you. You do what you can, but surrender where you're obviously being asked to, because that's just sort of the quality of the time that we're living in right now. So I hope this was helpful to anyone out there that needed it. And just know that whatever it is that you're experiencing now, there will be, of course, no one can know for sure, but the way I anticipate the days, especially leading up to the eclipse, and then like the day of, and then the days following, I think, and I can't really describe it in what way particularly, but I do think that in some way, when you finally find yourself at April 8th and like the days following, there will be some sort of like catharsis to the whole experience. Like, in other words, you'll be able to look back at this like space between now and maybe you don't have a complete sense of resolve, and maybe there's still discomfort, but you will at least have a better understanding of why this period had to be the way it was, and take that however it resonates to you. But I think that it will probably make sense, as nebulous as it sounds. April 8th and the days after, you might feel more of a sense of um, confidence in that sense of self and identity, and what had to be stripped away, and how that couldn't have been obvious right off the bat, and acting without thinking, how you kind of had to sit there and really contemplate to yourself in what ways um, this relationship or that relationship or this thing that you did every day um, was or was not contributing to your larger purpose, your larger sense of identity, and who you aim to be and how you aim to show up in this world. So it's a process for everybody. It's not linear. just like healing. And when I talk about the solar eclipse in another video, I will talk more about the themes of healing that are sort of associated with it, because you may or may not have heard that it will be occurring exactly conjunct Chiron, which is, the wounded healer. Some people call it an asteroid. I think it's technically like a minor planet. It's not quite a planet, not quite a star, not quite an asteroid, but it's the wounded healer, Chiron, and it is going to be exactly conjunct the solar eclipse, which is kind of remarkable in its own way. And it's hard to make anyone that doesn't really study astrology understand that, but it makes healing, in other words, like obviously an undeniable underlying theme of this whole eclipse season. So part of healing is sitting in that discomfort and alone with your thoughts in the very basic sense, and kind of where we are on the timeline now. So I will continue staying grounded with my plants and taking my little strolls through my garden and weeding things and nurturing things and adding soil here and like moving plants around and taking pictures. And I will try to keep my photos more, maybe do some more shorts when I don't really have anything to say on these videos, do some more shorts to at least show you how I've been engaging with nature as like my means of staying sane and grounded during all these energies. So I suggest you do the same. Find your own little way of grounding, and hope you take care of yourselves. Until next time.